disjointed portion. We don't have actually a lot that is super fascinating in this stretch, but we need to go through it. Technically speaking, we don't, but it's part of the ritual. So, the conundrum that we're at is that the early parts of these games are often the most inscrutable, specifically the bosses, and the Cleric Beast is one that I don't really have a lot to say about right now. It's kind of a perplexing portion of this game that I haven't been able to fit elsewhere. We do have this particular thing first, so let's talk.
Oh, you must be a hunter. And you're not one from around here either. I'm Gilbert, a fellow outsider. You must have had a fine time with it. Yarnum has a special way of treating guests. Well, I don't think I could stand if I wanted to, but I'm willing to help if there's anything that can be done. This town is cursed. Whatever your reasons might be, you should plan a swift exit. Whatever can be gained from this place, it will do more harm than good. Pale blood, you say? Never heard of it. But if it's blood you're interested in, you should try the Healing Church. The church controls all knowledge on blood ministration and all varieties of blood. Across the valley to the east of Yarnum lies the town of the Healing Church, known as the Cathedral Ward. And deep within Cathedral Ward is the old Grand Cathedral, the birthplace of the Healing Church's special blood, or so they say. Yarnumites don't share much with outsiders. Normally they wouldn't let you near the place, but the hunt is on tonight. This might be your chance. Across the valley to the east of Yarnum, deep within lies the old main cathedral, said to be the source of blood. I haven't heard of pale blood, but that's your best bet if it's anything to do with unique types of blood. Across the valley deep within lies
Alright.
the pale blood.
This, as we find out later, is Gilbert. I'm just going to throw that out there. I think it's a reference to the play Beckett slash movie. That'll be something that we'll explore later on. For now, just consider it foreshadowing. Oh. That was earlier guard break than I expected. So we've got this bit. Wow. With the big groups, it's best to try to break them up, especially earlier on. Still in that game. We have statues. Statues are always extremely important, but I don't have a lot to say about the statues in this area quite yet. Areas later on will be a little more intriguing. Got crucifixions with beast patients. And here we have the stereotypical, that's a fun way to put it, the usual, like, super enemy of the area. It's an executioner from later on. There's probably some level of lore meaning to that, but like I said, this section is a little difficult to parse sometimes. We open a shortcut here. It's not really one that ever is all that useful. Makes me wonder if it has some kind of more personal lore meaning, but there are some fun things that these guys say, but I don't think we've triggered any of them. In any case, let's move on through. There were a couple of people we could talk to that I skipped through last time.
Come on. You don't open the door on a night of a hunt. Away with you. Now.
It's also interesting to note that Gilbert is definitely marked as a bit of a foreigner, an outsider. Similar to you. The big crucifixion may have triggered a bell. Seeing it. I want to point out how oof. That was not not what I was expecting. How improvised the weaponry these phew. You don't want to get surrounded like that, but improvised weaponry. We got butcher cleavers, we got pitchforks. These are not, as I've said I think perhaps before, the tools of a experienced military force. More like a bunch of farmers who got pressed into trying to survive. I suspect I aggroed this particular one.
You that outsider? Well, sorry, but I don't want anything to do with you. Trot along, will ya?
Alright. That, I think, more or less does it for the extra stuff in this area that wasn't covered last time. We still got this. It's an interesting set piece that sort of gets repeated in other areas in this game, and perhaps another one. So keep it in mind. What we want is that item up there, or the area near it. You'll remember last time we went to the shortcut through that area. This time, we've got this interesting thing here now. Thanks to our insight, we can summon someone named Father Gascoigne. Most of you will not really have any mystery as to who that is, but I don't know, perhaps like literally one person will play this who's never heard of Gascoigne. It's intriguing that my understanding is that Gascoigne is a Irish name, at least from that area, according to a wiki or something. You deal with the sources that you have. Gilbert also has an accent that kind of marks him as being... Oh, that camera turn was inconvenient. Okay. Less than ideal, but we're fine. I want to actually go through this section slowly, so we'll just have to lure things out. That went better. We have the other shortcut that we opened up last time. That'll help. Oh, wow. I did not really expect you to show up here. I don't remember how that one gets triggered. Oh, well, these things happen. We have one of the more intriguing statue sections of the area up here. Nice view. Carriages transporting various goods, various coffins, perhaps. Never assume that things are always what they seem. Never assume always. Don't always assume. Bloodstone shards are nice and useful. Pebbles. As I mentioned in the write-up for the last one, the pebble is almost certainly a petrified eyeball. That might come in handy. That knowledge might come in handy later on. Still up in the air on that one, though. This is a very nice area to take because you get plenty of upgrade materials prior to your next boss fight. Some makes those sections a little smoother. And we return to the Dark Souls favorite of aqueducts. There's the curious question of how this aqueduct would even function, where perhaps that would be the pipe that they would come through if it were fully operational. Always plenty of things like grates that indicate sort of that water theme lurking in the background that I've been harping on. This enemy has a very peculiar weapon. It's almost like a lumber saw. It's also another thing worth noting that these enemies are considerably taller than the other ones. Differences are things that show up in this series a lot. And I don't think they are as arbitrary as people might tend to assume. This is very reminiscent of the previous aqueduct section. We've got the item that you fall down onto a thing from. You have, again, low water. And we also have rats. Rats aren't really guarding anything in this case, but we have what would be a water pipe that would be flowing through the city in better times. The aqueduct would continue along. And then we get ambushed. This is the hunter set. I really have... People often speculate that the location of the item sets that drop the armor sets have a lore importance, and I don't doubt that, but I often have time placing them. My understanding, and this could be incorrect, is that this is the set the hunter from the video on the title screen. If you stay on the selection screen, will be wearing the Sawblade hunter in that video. Meets an unfortunate end in a place that looks very different than this one. But I did forget to mention something. So we've got this aqueduct that feeds out into the previous area that we came from. The boat section would be through that one. And there's a... I don't know a lot about aqueducts. I do know that the moon should not be shining there. That's possibly a bug. Maybe, maybe not. It's always difficult to tell. But this would actually end up being a waterfall if the area is structured the way that it is, that we see it. That might be normal for an aqueduct. I don't honestly know, but it is curious that we have two sort of separate aqueducts, and we'll be coming up to one of two separate bridges. There is, again, this sense of duality in the world design. And each of those sets will lead us to one of the bosses of the area. The boss that we'll be taking on right about now is really optional. Probably the most skippable boss in the game, but also the one that most people are likely to go to first. And I could go back and level up and upgrade my weapon, but I don't know that that will be necessary. Because we're going to do something that I almost never do, and we're going to summon someone. I think that the enemies, the people that you summon for specific bosses are part of the lore for that boss in some way. And it's interesting that Father Gascoigne, who will be the second boss that we will run into, whose house, incidentally, is right through that gate that we opened up to last time. Father Gascoigne is someone you can summon for this particular boss. And that opens the question of how do these two characters relate, whether they do or not. But here, we have Father Gascoigne. Patented axe is a gun that he can shoot despite having the axe fully open. He cheats, but I guess that's why we love him. We have two werewolves. We do not really need to fight them. It's not super worth it, though it can. I don't know actually what will happen with Gascoigne. Got another clump. Will he follow? I'm not entirely sure. I could have just ended up wasting that insight. He seems to be here. And there's the cleric beast jumping on in. Ribcage has seen better days. I'd rather not have him in this corner. That corner's not that thicker. It's a visceral, that's something I don't typically do, but I guess Gascoigne has its benefits. That backswipe is, difficult to dodge. It comes out really quick. I appreciate though that it doesn't do a ton of damage. It's more of a get off the warning swipe than it is. They got some fungalness on the back carapace there. It's a design feature that shows up a lot. People have also pointed out that there are some Manus things that are similar. Don't know if you don't know who Manus is, but the misshapen arm, or missized arms, a small one and a large one, is a very unusual feature of Manus. He also has some things like eyes and horns that are structurally similar to our friend Manus. One thing that I've always found interesting is that this door is here. It is not usable. And in the area almost directly above this, there is another door that always is marked as cannot be used yet. People speculate that that was something that was taken out of a version of this game. And there is a Tumblr blog, I believe it's called Illusory Wall, that goes to the Dark Souls 2 architecture. And one of the things that they have pointed out is that there's evidence that in Dark Souls 2 at one point you could walk through the aqueduct there in order to make a shortcut to one of the central areas of the game. Sometimes I wonder if there's a synchronicity where this particular door never had to be taken out for some particular technical reason, and the Dark Souls 2 entrance passage was blocked to maintain consistency. Some other interesting things. Ever since getting that point of insight last time, we now have insight messengers in a vat that used to be empty. Nothing terribly interesting here yet. But it's always striking to me how sickly these are. Like, they don't really want to be here. That one kind of looks cold or belligerent. Whereas you have the blood bath, where the messengers are, a little more upbeat. One interesting feature is that you get a new messenger every time you get a badge from a boss, or the ground, I suppose. This particular badge tends to, in my mind, tie the cleric beast somehow to Ludwig. How that works is really up in the air, but that is one of the few things that you can make an attachment to. There's also, that badge allows us to have the Hunter Chief emblem. It is something you can use to get to the third boss. We won't be. There is a sort of similar item to this in Dark Souls 1, and I think that's another example of a resonant echo. This should also be mentioned that this item is talking about determining the end of a hunt with a captain's return, and the item in Dark Souls, the Crest of Artorias, opens up to a hunter area. So those parallels do exist. I'm not going to speculate too much about them right now. That item also allows us to buy the Kirk Hammer. The Kirk Hammer is not especially helpful in terms of character progression. You can't really attach it to anyone. It's curious that the sword that the hammer is based on, the one-handed weapon, is pretty close to the Ludwig's greatsword that we will be seeing later on, the Holy Blade. Sometimes I wonder if there's a intended progression there, or a branch deciding whether to go blade or mace. The one curious suggestion I've seen mentioned for the cleric beast is that it might be a reference to Varl Ginland, I believe, from Demon Souls, who had a very iconic, silly-looking hammer. Kirkhammer's kind of similar to that, in which case he might be defending a maiden that we will see later on, who will definitely be having a good time. Definitely. I think that's mostly going to do it for this one. I'll probably level up off screen. It's not terribly interesting. I did want to see if our friend Gehrman had anything to say. His dialogue progresses as you progress through the game, but I don't see him. I don't know if he's here, and I wonder if there's a pattern to him not being here. It is something that I'm not 100% clear on, where all he can spawn in this area. He's often in here. And the other area that I can recall him as being back in this separate garden, and I don't see him. So he's missing. Are there triggers to when he goes missing? I don't know. Anyway, I think that will do it. Next time we will have a similar stream with Gascoigne. Gascoigne gives us more to work with, but that's also something that we'll have to piece together as the game progresses. And thank you for joining me. I will talk to you next time.